Hi, welcome to Facebook Live. I'm Kim Campbell at PlantPure. Tonight we're going to make something easy again. I promise you we'll always do easy recipes. We're making a baked Indian samosa. And if you don't know what an Indian samosa is, it usually starts with a pastry. It's like a pastry dough that they roll out and they stuff it with potatoes, really spicy, delicious potatoes. And then they seal it kind of like a calzone, and they drop it into hot oil and fry it to get it really crispy. So don't order these at an Indian restaurant because they're going to be really greasy. Tonight I want to show you a really simple version of this that's going to have all the flavor and all the pow of a traditional samosa, but it will be fat-free. So we're going to start with potatoes first. So we'll walk over here, and I'm going to do a lot of things ahead of time because that way we can get through this in 15 or 20 minutes, and I promised you these would be short Facebook Lives. What I did is I boiled up potatoes and cauliflower, and then I just roughly mashed them so they're ready to go. If you're really lazy and you don't want to boil a potato or cauliflower, they have frozen potatoes now. They have frozen cauliflower, they have frozen hash browns. You could certainly try it with that. So the next thing I want to talk about are tortillas, because rather than using one of those fatty pastry doughs, we're going to use tortillas instead. And tortillas are often a big issue in the plant-based community because many of them are not clean, and especially at mainstream grocery stores, it's really hard to find clean ones. By the way, if you have any questions or you want to have input, please feel free to text your questions. My daughter is behind the phone, and staff at PlantPure is going to be answering questions as well, and she's a great resource for all of you. So I got tortillas. I got some different kinds. The one I'm going to be using tonight is the Ezekiel, which a lot of people complain about these. They're fat-free, they're whole grain, but they tend to break a lot, so I'll show you some tricks for keeping them from breaking. And then I was at Trader Joe's today, and I got the corn and the wheat blend, which these are really nice tortillas. There's no oil in them, and you can see they bend really easy. The only issue I have with this recipe is they're a little bit small for my liking, but I think we can make smaller samosas as well. When I get into a real bind and I can't find Ezekiel, I've actually gotten the Alvarado. These do have some added oils in them. They're about 12% of the total calories from fat. So this is when I'm in a pickle, I might get this one. But again, these actually have issues with breaking too. A tortilla, in order for it to be stretchy and pliable, they put salts and they put oils in them. So that's why with this one you get a little more breaking. So what we're going to do is I'll show you what I do with these first, because you want to get them in the oven because you want to get them soft so you can work with them. So I took one of them out and I wrapped it up in a wet paper towel. And you can see they're already starting to break on the edge. They're not going to roll very well, so we want to get those wrapped up. And then I bought this handy little microwave, I don't know what you call it, but there isn't even a brand on it. I found it at the kitchen store, and you can put your tortillas right in there and microwave them right before you need them. So we'll try that with this. I typically just wrap them in paper towels and microwave them by themselves, but this will keep it nice and hot. So that'll go in the microwave. Another strategy, if you don't want to use a microwave, is come over here to my oven. I have it on about 300. About 250 to 300 is perfect. And I wrapped up the tortillas in tin foil. And then I wrapped them again in a wet towel. So you're essentially steaming them and getting that moisture in there so that they're real pliable and easy to work with. We're not going to be doing that just yet, so I'm going to stick it back in the oven. But that's really the trick with tortillas. Just keeping them moist and steaming them is key. So we'll set that over here. The first thing we're going to do is saute the onions, because we've got our potatoes ready and then we've got our tortillas are warming up. So those are the first two things you want to do. And then you're going to use an onion. You can use any kind of onion you like. I'm going to use a red onion. I just happen to like red onions. They're just a little bit sweeter. And we'll put it in the pan. Typically, I just goofed. Usually I get my pan really hot, but it doesn't really matter. we're going to dry saute. You can steam saute and put more water in here, but we're going to dry saute. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my gas stove on here. Hopefully it turns on. This is basically my camping stove because my induction burner makes a lot of noise with the phone. Now, I always have something wet next to me to saute with, so you can choose to use water, you can choose vegetable broth. I'll use vegetable broth tonight. I don't typically use a lot of vegetable broth because it's expensive and it tends to have a lot of sodium in them. There's 3 different kinds I bought today to show you. The Pacific is one brand. It's actually the lowest in salt, so that's why I'm using that one. And then the other one is Kitchen Basics. I get the unsalted, and then I got the Trader Joe's brand. I believe the one that was highest in sodium was the Kitchen Basics. So I keep them in the refrigerator and just mainly use them for sauteing. Are we getting any questions yet, Laura?
Not yet.
Okay. So while that's doing its thing, I want to talk to you about peppers because we're going to put the pepper in here next. So Laura, show them the different peppers. This is a poblano, this is a jalapeno, serrano, and habanero. And this is the mildest, and this is the hottest. So as a general rule, when you're looking at peppers, the smaller they are, the more heat you're going to end up with. Tonight I'm using this one because it seems to be a perfect one for our family, and I'm going to use some of the seeds in this too. If you use the seeds in the ribs, it tends to make it a little bit spicier because that's where all the heat is stored, is in the seeds and the ribs. And pretty soon these onions will start to stick to the pan, and call that caramelizing the onions. The sugars from the onions, you can see, starts to stick there. And to lift that sugar off the pan, because you don't want it to burn, put a little bit of vegetable broth in there. Keep moving it around. By the way, I used a lot of onions tonight. It calls for 1 onion. This was a monster red onion. It's okay. Onions are good for you. I really like them. They add a lot of flavor. Almost every dish I make starts out with an onion and garlic. We have people on, Laura? 54 people on. 54 people, and they're not saying anything. Surely somebody has an opinion about samosas. You know, I love to go to an Indian restaurant because the flavors are so wonderful, but they ruin it with all the butter and the oils, and it just, I never feel good after I eat out at an Indian restaurant. Plus, all the spices on top of it can really do a number on your digestive system if you're not used to all of the oils and the rich foods. So these are starting to get a little bit tender, so I'm going to put my jalapeno in there, and you can see that I left some of the seeds in there, and I know I have a reputation for liking spicy food. I like to have enough spice so that there's a little bit of a tingle on the back of my tongue. So put that in there. If you wanted to, you could use a smaller pepper if you want more heat. And then I'm going to put some ginger in here, and there's different ways you can do ginger. This is the way I always do it because I'm pretty lazy, and this is so convenient. Then there's the fresh, you can peel it and take a microplane and grate it, and it works beautifully. Or I went to Trader Joe's today, and I got frozen crushed ginger, and I'm going to use that for the chutney. But I wanted to show you, there's no oil in this. Some of these have oil, but this one doesn't. Comes out like that, and they're frozen, but when you take them out, they actually feel like a sponge. I can't get it out with my hand, but They're very convenient and you can keep them right in the freezer. I would say each one is about a teaspoon.
Question from Brandon Buxton. What is the ratio from fresh ginger to dried ginger?
I'd say about half. Dried ginger is more potent.
It might be on the fresh container.
Yeah, usually dry is a little less than fresh because it's just more potent. So you can see I'm getting all the sugars that are on here. And you can use dry ginger, not being a ginger snob, but I tell you what, after you use fresh or you buy the minced in the jar, you will never go back to dry. So that's pretty good for the onions. And I'm going to go ahead and put the garlic in. And I know the recipe on the website says 4 to 5 garlic cloves. And I promise you that's probably more like 8 to 9 because I love garlic. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. You don't want to burn the garlic. Garlic gets really bitter when it's burned.
Does the pre-processed ginger and garlic lose nutritional value?
Probably. It probably does. Everything is better fresh. I didn't used to cook with a lot of ginger, but over the years, the more I cook with it, the more I love to use it, especially in dressings and sauces. It's really nice. So now I'm going to start with my spices. I've turned the heat down. I'm going to put 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric in there. That's going to give it a really bright Indian color. And then this is cumin. Laura, you can show them the jar. This is about 1/2 teaspoon of cumin. And coriander. Coriander and cilantro both come from the same plant. Coriander is the seed, cilantro is the leaf. And then I'm going to put a little bit more moisture in here because it's drying up a bit and you don't want your spices to dry up and burn. Keep them moving. And gram masala is a blend of spices. It has cumin in it, coriander, it has cardamom, black pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg. It's very floury tasting. I like it, but if you use too much of it, it can overpower a dish, so be careful with that. Also be very careful with the turmeric too, because that is a very bitter spice if you use too much of it. It has a beautiful color and you really just don't need a lot. Alright, so these are fennel seeds. When they're toasted fennel seeds, and they have sort of a licorice type flavor, and they use them in sausages and a lot of meat, so when I taste fennel seeds, it reminds me of my youth in sausage.
Good when you're nauseous.
Yeah, it's good to chew on. It's great for your digestive system. You see how I just keep adding that vegetable broth because you just don't want it to dry out. And then some black pepper, because if it's not enough heat to have the jalapeno, I've got to put more of that in there. And then I'm going to put some salt in there. And the salt helps the flavors to pop. You don't need to add a lot, just a little bit. If you didn't put any salt in there, this might taste really bitter to you. Okay, so I think I've got everything in there. Now I'm going to add 1 cup of peas. I use frozen peas. And really, folks, that is all there is to this dish. So I'm going to bring over my potatoes and we'll scoop that in. It's potatoes and cauliflower. I used red potatoes. I think I used about 3 or 4 of them, and I used actually a whole head of cauliflower. You don't have to use, this is really however much you want, and that's probably good enough. I've got a lot left over here and I'll use that for something else. So last night Nelson and I had this for dinner, and it was so good that we never even got to the wrapping part. We just ate it just like it is. Like Indian mashed potatoes. Sorry, those are our woofer dogs. The other thing you can do to this is you can bump it up nutritionally, and you can put some kale in there. I apologize, they will stop in a minute. You could put carrots, you could put red peppers, you could put spinach. I'm going to turn it off. That's not my dog. My children's dogs bark way more than my dog does. So that's it. And that's really the filling to, Laura. The joy of doing Facebook Live. You never know what's going to happen, what's going to burn or bark. So that's it. I don't want to over stir it because it's just going to get mushy. And then I'll take my tortillas out of the oven and open them up. You can see all the steam coming out of that. If I wrap them up in a dish towel. Ooh, and they are so hot. I don't know if I can touch them.
Nancy Francis wants to know if it's a spicy dish.
It can be. It depends on the pepper that you use. I used a jalapeno. It really depends. I didn't think it was spicy, but I know people say that I have a spicy palate. So you can see how, look how pliable this is. You can do anything with it. So all the people that say that these break and crack, you just have to make sure you get them really moist.
Molly said she might try it with rice paper wrappers.
Oh, you could. I thought about that. And then baking it. That would be great. There's different ways you can do it. Because a samosa is a triangle, you can bring it over like that and then fold it one more time. You're not supposed to see that. It did break. And then flip it over, and you're going to put it on your cookie sheet, and I just lined mine with parchment paper. This is the end, the finished product. So it's kind of like a cracker. And these are great for lunch boxes, you know, or for the next day. I wrapped this one up like a burrito. So we'll put a couple more of these in. Alright, so let's do one more, and we'll roll this one up like a burrito. So I have something to talk about tonight. I had the pleasure of helping out in public schools yesterday. I worked in an elementary school here in our town. Look how nicely that just rolled up. And I was plopped into the school cafeteria the first hour that I arrived, and you would not believe what was in the cafeteria. And I haven't been in public schools for 10 years, so I was surprised. The first thing they had was macaroni and cheese, and it didn't even look appealing. It had white macaroni noodles, it had oil and cheese, and I didn't taste it, and I'm sure it probably had lots of salt and gross stuff. And then the second choice was a cheeseburger on a white bun. So those were their two main choices. And then they went down the line and they got some, I think it looked like apple pie filling. So I don't know if there was sugar in it or what was in it. And then there was a salad. It was iceberg lettuce with about 4 or 5 tomatoes on it and a banana in the peel. So they went through the line and they sat down and they had 15 minutes to eat this horrific food. Oh, and they had to get milk. They could get white milk or chocolate milk. And so all the children had chocolate milk, of course, because it's sweeter. There was, as far as I saw, there were no water bottles that were offered or glasses of water. Then they had about 15 minutes to eat, and so the social time and the eating time interfered, and so most of that food that went on their plate went right into the trash. So we have a long ways to go in our public schools. It's so sad to see what we offer young children and the modeling of that to kids. So anyways, I'll stop. I was ranting about it yesterday. I was ranting about it this morning. Laura's heard me so many times. But you had that experience in high school.
Yeah, I never ate the school lunches.
Yeah.
There's nothing to eat.
And how much time did you have to eat?
Probably 15 minutes after I got all my stuff in the microwave.
The kids, they don't have enough time to eat. The selection is awful. It's just a sad story in our public schools.
Nancy said, "Who makes the menu?"
Yeah, who makes the menu? The dietitians? I don't know. You know, it's government run, I guess. All right, so we're gonna make a chutney. This is the last thing I'm gonna show you. The chutney starts with a yogurt. I make my own yogurt, so this is my homemade yogurt that I strain, and I don't know why, but my strained yogurt is always lumpy, but I have to tell you, it tastes really good. If I don't strain it, it's not lumpy, but I'm gonna use my yogurt because it tastes great. I use the Instant Pot, but if you don't wanna make your own yogurt, I totally understand. Lately it's been something I just love to have on hand because I like it with my cereal in the morning. But if you don't have yogurt, you can buy, this is an almond milk yogurt. But again, these all, even though it says they're unsweetened or they're plain, there's always a lot of sugar in them.
Not in the unsweetened though.
Well, this one is Kite Hill, and it says unsweetened plain yogurt. And so if I go over here to the, well, I guess this one only has 1 gram of sugar, so I guess it's good. But I will tell you, it was $5 for this
plain doesn't
container.
mean unsweetened. It has to be plain and unsweetened.
Yes, it has to be plain and unsweetened. So I couldn't find this unsweetened. It's really hard to find unsweetened yogurt in a mainstream grocery store. So there are choices, but they're a little more expensive. So we start out with a cup of yogurt, and then I'm going to add some maple syrup, and I think I have 2 teaspoons of maple syrup. And this is nice, especially if you're going to use yogurt, because my yogurt's very tangy, so it takes that little bit of tang out of it. And then lemon juice, and you might not need as much lemon juice if you make your own yogurt. I'm going to use a couple teaspoons of ginger, and I use the Trader Joe's frozen ginger on that one. 2 or 3 garlic cloves. Okay, and this is a jalapeno pepper. This is going to give it spice, but I did take most of the ribs and the seeds out. And then mint, fresh mint, about 1/4 cup. You know, chutneys are, to me, the Indian version of salsa. And then this is cilantro, fresh cilantro. And if you notice, I'm using my bullet. I use my bullet a lot when I'm making dressings, just because it's easier to get it out, and it's not as, I mean, my Vitamix is just big, and this is just very, very convenient. Just put the lid on, and again, I can't mute Facebook, so we'll put this in here. Are you ready? Plug your ears. Because my yogurt's really thick, I'm going to add, you can see how thick it is, I'm going to add a little bit of water to it.
Sarah Webb wants to know if you can do a recipe for Instant Pot vegan yogurt at some point.
Yes, I actually have a video, you know, just a top-down hands video of yogurt, but we could do it, we could have a yogurt night, all things yogurt. That would be fun. So the other thing I was going to tell you, if you don't have yogurt, you could just use soy milk in this. You're still going to get all that minty cilantro garlic flavor. And I'm going to put a little bit of salt in this. But if you add up the salt that I used for this and for the potatoes, it's pretty minimal because this will serve a good 4 people. And that's it. Just so you can see how thick it is. This is really thick because, again, I use the Greek style strained yogurt. If you use milk, it'll be thinner. You can use less milk. And then taste it and adjust it. You know, this is what I like, but you may like something a little bit sweeter, a little more tart, tangy. Wow, this is perfect. And It's very spicy. It's pretty spicy, but I like the spice, and I think it'll go nice with the potatoes. So what we did the other night, we've had this 3 nights in a row, is we just put the chutney on there. Oh my gosh, that is so good. You don't even need the tortilla. You could just have the potatoes and the chutney and it's perfect. Laura's drooling because she can't eat it. It's a little bit spicy, and I think the spice is coming from the chutney. Anyways, write in what you'd like us to cook for the weeks coming up. Next week I'm going to do something more fall-like. We'll get into more of the pumpkin thing. The pumpkin thing goes on until Christmas, but we'll do a little bit of something with pumpkin. Maybe we'll pick a dessert or a breakfast. But anyways, I'll see you next week. Join me back here in 1 week, 6:30. Have a nice evening.